Hello, this is Jacqueline from Jack Knits, and it is hat knitting weather. The weather's starting to get a little bit cooler, so it's time to start cranking out those fall and winter hats. This pattern that I'm going to show you is my pattern called the Slip and Purl Hat. It highlights these beautiful lines of slip stitches along with some purl stitches that really make those slip stitches pop out. So I encourage you to give this hat a try. It is very easy. It takes less than a skein of yarn. Will only take you a day or two to do, a couple sittings, and you have created this beautiful hat. This video is going to take you through each of the sections of the hat, the ribbing, this beautiful stitch for the slip and purl hat, as well as the decreases for the crown. So let's get started on this wonderful new pattern. All right, let's get started on this really fun slip and purl hat. Let's go over the materials that you're going to need for this hat. First of all, on the yarn, I've knitted these first couple hats with just a basic acrylic yarn. I used a chunky weight yarn for both of these hats. I am going to use for this demonstration also a chunky weight yarn, but I'm going to use 100% wool, this buttercream yarn. I'm really anxious to see how this turns out. I have not knitted with this yarn before, so I'm anxious to see how this turns out in a hat. I think it's going to look really nice. Then for the size needles, we're going to knit this in the round. So we are going to start with a 9-inch 16-inch long circular needle for the brim of the hat, the ribbing. And then we're going to switch to a US size 10 needle. I've got interchangeable needles, so I'm just going to switch my tips to the number 10 for the rest of the hat. And then when you get to the top of the hat where you're doing the decreases, when you've got too few stitches on your circular needle to comfortably knit with, you will want to switch to some double pointed needles, a US size 10 as well. Now, if you are limited on your supply of needles, it's not going to make a huge bit of difference if you just use one size needle for the entire hat. So if you just have a size 10, just use that for the entire one. I just chose to use a little bit smaller one for the ribbing just to make it a little tighter fit. Now I've got two sizes for this pattern, and I'll have a link to the free pattern in the description below. These two I made were kind of more of a larger size. They're a little bit looser on my head, so I'm going to call it a large size for maybe you could use it for a male. Then I'm going to show you on this demonstration the small and medium size hat, and that just eliminates one of these sections of this repeat pattern to make it a little bit smaller. All right, you're probably also going to want to need a stitch marker as well. All right, let's get started. For the small medium size hat, we are going to cast on 64 stitches, and we are going to just use the long tail method for our casting on method. So go ahead and start by casting on 64 stitches, and then we will start with the ribbing. All right, I've casted on 64 stitches. I just made it with my long tail here. And now we are going to join in the round. So just make sure that all of your cast on edge is towards the center of your circular needle. With your working yarn in on the right side of your needle, we will just begin to start with our row 1, and we're going to just do a 1 by 1 ribbing for a few inches. So just start your first row with a knit and purl sequence. Knit 1, purl 1. Oh, you're going to probably want to put a stitch marker. I'm going to remember to do that on my second round, but put a stitch marker at the start of your round as well. That will help in the future pattern. And let's do this 1 by 1 ribbing for several inches. Let's see, I think I did it for about, with this hat, it's about 2.5 inches. So we will continue with this ribbing for 2.5 inches. I will see you back at the end of my ribbing, and then we'll go on to the pattern of the hat. All right, let's continue with our hat. I have completed about 2.5 inches here of my ribbing. And now I'm about to go on to the rest of my hat, the Slip and Purl hat. Now I've also switched to my number US size 10 needle. For the rest of the hat, I was using a US size number 9 for the ribbing. But if you only have one size needle, just use a number 10 throughout the whole thing. That should be just fine. Okay, so now we're going to start with our slip and purl pattern repeat, our stitch pattern, and we're going to start by doing a slip stitch, and we're going to do a slip stitch with the yarn in back, and we're going to slip it purlwise. So just slip that first stitch from one needle to the other. And now we are going to purl for 7 stitches. So let's bring our yarn to the front and let's purl for 7 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Oops, 7, there we go. And let's do another slip stitch with the yarn in back, and we're going to do that again, slipping it purlwise, and we will do that 7 purl stitches again. And then we will just continue that 8 stitch repeat throughout the entire round. So starting with a slip stitch and then purling 7. So slip stitch, purl 7 all the way around. So let me do that for the first round, and then I'll show you what round 2 looks like. All right, I am getting to the end of round 1. I'm approaching my stitch marker, so I know I'm at the end of round 1. And now we will go to round 2. And round 2 is very similar to round 1, but instead of slipping this first stitch of that stitch repeat, we are going to knit it. And then we're going to continue purling the next 7. So we'll knit the first stitch, purl the next 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then go back and do that same stitch, 8 stitch repeat. So knitting 1 and then purling 7. And we will continue to do that until the end of the round. And then you'll just continue to repeat that 2 round pattern until your piece measures 6.5, I believe, 6.5 inches from your cast on. So until it gets to 6.5 inches, continue that repeat. And what that slipping stitches that you're going to do on every round is what creates this really fun elevated, elongated knit stitch, and then the purl stitches in the background just kind of set that off and make those slip stitches really pop. So that's what makes this this pattern so fun, and it's really turning out, I think it's going to turn out really pretty with this beautiful yarn. So let's continue that stitch pattern. I will come back and then we will start the decreases for the crown of the hat. All right, I've continued on with our slipping and purling stitch on this hat until now it has reached the length of about 6.5 inches. And now we are ready to start doing the decreases. Now I ended on round 2, which is important to do before we start decreasing. So I've just finished round 2, and now we're going to start our first decrease row or round. So we're going to start by slipping this first stitch just like we have been on our other round 1, slipping it purlwise with the yarn in back. Then we are going to purl 5 stitches. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now we are going to purl these next 2 stitches together for a decrease. So we're going to bring our yarn to the front again and now insert our needle in both of these 2 stitches to purl those two together. So that has decreased 1 in this section. Now we're going to slip the next stitch and do that very same thing again. Purl 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we will purl the next two together. So insert into both of those stitches to purl together. And let's do that repeat all the way to the end of the row, slipping 1, purling 5, and then purl 2 together. Okay, I'm purling the last two here together, finishing that first round of our decreases. So now the next row is not going to include any decreases, but we're just going to now, instead of slipping that first stitch, we are going to knit that stitch, and now we will purl for 6 stitches, because now we only have 6 stitches in between each of our sections, because we decreased 1 in those sections. So we will purl for 6 and then knit 1 and purl another 6, and we will do that for this entire round as well. All right, 5 and 6 here. We're at the end again of round number 2. So of our decreases. So now we're going to do another decrease round, but we're just going to eliminate the number of purl stitches between our sections by 1, because we obviously have 1 left. So we are going to, again for this round, slip 1 purlwise with the yarn and back, and we are going to now only purl 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, which leaves 2 more stitches before our next slip stitch, which we will purl those 2 together. So you can kind of see what our pattern is for this entire round and for all of our decreases. So for every round 1 decrease, we are going to purl till we have 2 stitches before the next slip stitch. Then we will purl those 2 together. So that's going to decrease by 1 every single time. Then the round 2 of these decrease rounds is going to just be knitting that first stitch, which we had slipped in the previous row, and then purling to the next slip stitch, which we will knit in a round. So we're going to just follow that pattern, decreasing 1 stitch in each of these sections on our round 1. Eventually, in a couple rows here, we're going to have too few stitches to comfortably knit on our circular needles. So then I'm going to switch to my double pointed needles here. So I will show that to you when I get to that point. But let me just do a couple more rounds of these decreases every other round, and then we'll switch to the DPNs, finish up the rest of the decreases, and then close up the top. All right, I am just completing another decrease round where I'm slipping and then I'm purling just 2 at this point, because I've been doing a couple more decreases, and then purling these last 2 together. And I've completed now another decrease round, and now you can see that I've got quite very few stitches left on my circular needles, where it's getting almost too tight for it to comfortably knit around in a circle. So I'm going to switch now to DPNs. Now you can do this one of 2 ways. You can just slip each section to or a set of stitches to the DPNs, or you can knit with the DPNs in your next round. I will do it the easier way just for demonstration purposes, and I will slip several stitches to each of 3 DPNs, and then we'll continue the rest of our knitting using DPNs. So I've removed my stitch marker, because now the stitch marker is just going to fall off at the end of a DPN. So I'm not going to be able to use a stitch marker for the end of my round. I'm going to utilize where my tail is to remember when my round ends. All right, let's just slip these. We're going to just slip these stitches purl-wise just from one. We're not really knitting anything at this point. We're just slipping the stitches. And I'm going to slip 3 of these sections onto my first DPN. That's 2 sections. And slip another section, and now let's pick up another DPN. Now if you want, if you don't have DPNs or you are more familiar working with magic loop, you can at this point too transfer your stitches to a longer circular needle and do the magic loop method with that. But I like using DPNs just for these last couple rounds, but that is your preference. You can do whatever you'd like to switch to where you can stitch comfortably with such few stitches on your needles. All right, let's do, I did 2 sections on that second needle, and then I'm going to do my last needle with 3 sections. Okay, so now you can just set aside your circular needle. And now we will continue our pattern of decreasing every other round, but we will be using our DPN. So I'll pick up my 4th DPN, and I am on the round 2 of my decreases, so I'm not doing a decrease this round. I am knitting the first stitch, and then I am purling to that next slip stitch and knitting. And then after this round I will do another decrease round, and I will continue this pattern until I only have the slip stitch and a regular purl stitch for each section. And then we're going to finish our round with knitting 2 together all the way around. So I'll show that to you at the end. But let me just do these few more decrease rounds with the DPNs, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, at this point I have completed all my decrease rounds, and now I only have 2 stitches in each of my sections, the knit stitch or the slip stitch and a purl stitch in between all the way around. So for this very final round of decreases, I'm not going to be purling 2 together anymore. I'm going to be knitting 2 together, and I'm going to knit 2 together all the way around, and that's going to be our very final round. So let's knit 2 together. So instead of knitting just 1, we're going to knit 2 stitches together and do that all the way around. Okay, that is the end of my knitting. See, I just have now only, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches left on my needle, and now we're ready to just close it up. So what you're going to need is a darning needle. Let me grab one here. A darning needle. Just to do this last little step, we are going to, I'll grab the scissors here as well. Cut our tail of our yarn off, thread that through your darning needle, and we are going to just now simply slip those stitches from our DPNs onto our darning needle. All right, just pull that last thing, and we're just going to now tug on this until it closes that gap up, and we can now slip our needle through the very center of the top, turn it inside out, If you want, you can kind of secure that up, that last little hole of the top of your hat, with just kind of threading your needle one more time through that last series of stitches. And that will just kind of enforce that closure just a little bit tighter. And then you can weave in your end. I'll let you do that on your own. Weave that in, also the tail from the start, and you have completed your slip and purl hat. What a beautiful hat. This yarn worked up really nice. Again, it's this buttercream Luke's Craft roving yarn, 100% wool, a chunky weight, made for this very beautiful, beautiful hat. So I hope you give this hat a try. It makes a great fall, winter hat, a beautiful stitch. I love these elongated stitches of slip stitches, and then those purl stitches just help make those pop out so nicely. So give this a try, and don't forget to subscribe if you'd like. You'll see future videos all about knitting tips and tutorials, fun stitches, and creative stitch patterns that are easy to do for even the beginner. So thanks for watching, everyone. Happy knitting.